Thank you for your patience and welcome to Art Space 114. This is an artist-based, commission-free gallery. So when you buy half the work down here later on this evening, remember, it all goes to the artist. Okay, so that's it. Welcome to such a great show. It truly is an astounding show of four magnificent women who will all be introduced by our host, Shana Nys Dambrot, who is not just a wonderful art critic, not just a writer, not just a curator, but also a very, very good friend of mine who has led the charge in downtown Los Angeles and the arts movement here. So again, thank you so much for coming. I'm going to leave this to her. I'm Tom Gilmore, the owner of the gallery. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. There's so much history and so much backstory that goes into even how everything settled into all of us being here in this space tonight, that would almost be its whole own. Someone, not me, needs to write that book. It really is an amazing thing because I moved to this neighborhood in 2008, which almost makes me a newbie in terms of like the history that's been going on here. But I moved here because I realized at one point it's where all my friends lived and all my friends are artists. And at that time, it was kind of like Little Soho. It had that energy. It was these crazy lofts, no elevators, no hot water, but like 40,000 square feet to make your craziness. And it was everything that anyone has ever said about the legend of downtown LA. Like it's all true and more. And I wanted to be part of it. And I moved here and I discovered that it was all true. And, then forces come and go, things change. But you being able to now sort of see like on the other side of that, this space as something both high profile and professional and super grassroots and community at the same time, that to me is what the downtown LA art world always has been. And particularly because we have this incredible architecture that we move among and inhabit. And it changes your sense of things when you're, 100 years is like the Parthenon in LA time, but it's an incredible thing. And so I love the way that it's kind of revitalizing the promise of what this neighborhood has been. And so here comes Tom and he's like, this is such an incredible space. It deserves to be filled with art. I don't want to run a commercial program, but the neighborhood has such a rich history. Let's just honor it like one move at a time. And so believe it or not, this is only the second show, but it feels like this place has been here forever. And the first one was hyper local. I think only one of them had to even cross the street pretty much to bring their art here. Like it was crazy local, but no offense to anyone, it was for men. And so everybody was like, hey, and he was like, don't worry, I've got you. And look at these four incredible women with their deep and long and historic ties to LA, to downtown. They come, they go, they're prodigal. And here we all are. And I think it's such a beautiful assortment, the four together. And tonight we're going to talk about these two. And I want to start by giving each of you just a chance to, one at a time, kind of let people know who you are and what you're up to. But I'm also really obsessed with the way in which juxtaposing your works together brings out sort of unexpected things in each of y'all. And there's resonance and divergence. And I think it's going to be really interesting to pull some of that apart. But I want to start first by giving each of you your space to do that. I'm going to start. Oh God, I feel like I should flip a coin or something. Like you're both my friends. And Laurie, because we're sitting in her room. Laurie Lipton. You're a freaking legend. You are an international, there's a cult of you. There's an army of people who are obsessed with you. And I don't even mean that in a creepy way, but globally, you have this fan base that are just obsessed. And I'm one of them. I'm low level compared. And you really do something that I feel like no one else is even still doing, but you've also been doing it for long enough that you can say in a way in the modern era, this kind of thing started with you. So the most important thing I love to tell people who don't know is that these are pencil drawings, and that's bonkers, both from you doing it and your skill level. And so I wonder if you could just tell your story about how that even happened. It's you and boxes of pencils. And I want you to please tell everybody how this became your signature.
Hello, I am bonkers and cultish. And yes, I started drawing when I was about 4. And the reason I started was to get control over overwhelming emotions. And the reason I was attracted to this technique, I wanted to paint like the Flemish masters from the 15th century. They did these egg tempera paintings where they get a two-haired brush and dip it in egg white and mix it with a white pigment and go me, 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 me. And then they glaze over with color and then go back to the form and go me, 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 and then they glaze it. So I tried to teach myself that from books because this is pre-internet and when dinosaurs roamed the world. And I couldn't manage. It was just, I just couldn't get it. So I, yeah. So
This is
developed this crazy drawing technique. Because I was always drawing. So I automatically started going, eat, 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 with tiny little pencil points. And when I say they're drawings, it's a misnomer. They're more like graphite paintings because they're built up over and over and over. There are layers of, I look at it like colors. So the grays is cold grays, there's warm grays, and it's over and over. And my drawings take longer than a painting of equal size. And it's interesting. It's very, very controlled technique about passion, about emotion. And that's the way for me to be in control about uncontrollable shit that's happened in my life and in the world. And it's interesting, as I got older, my work, first it started out with mommy. I drew a lot about my poor mother. Thank God my mother understood and just went, "Oh, that's lovely, dear." You know, I had knives in her head. And
daggers.
I just, and then I was a teenager and the sexuality was very me, me, me. And then I started doing in the 20s about relationships. And now in my young old age, it's gone outwards and it's about social media, climate change, politics, things make me feel strongly. That's what my work is about.
I think that it's worth drilling down a little bit on this idea. You're talking about this dynamic between control and this like fiery emotions, right? But at the same time, like I find it completely a wonder, a mystery that you're able to keep all of that kind of flush of all of those emotions, for better or worse, even though it's this impossible long, like in other words, you look at these and other than just like if you're paying attention, you realize, oh my God, the technique, the patience, but they don't feel tight. And you might think that if somebody went, meet, 15 hours a day for a year, that some of that tension or something repetitive or other kinds of things might blank some of that out. But what's incredible to me is that you're able to be so patient with rendering all these tiny little details, but that in the end it has all of this motion and life in it. Like that to me is where a lot of the wonder of the piece comes from.
But that's the thing. Everyone asks me, how long does that take you? The thing is, that's not the point. The point is not the finished product. The point is the process.
Yeah.
And the process is my bliss. The process.
You seem really blissed out.
Oh, I'm so fucking blissed out. I remember, in my 20s, I had a waitress. I had a waitress speaking Dutch, by the way. Anytime I feel depressed now, I just think, honey, you don't have to waitress speaking Dutch, just shut up. So anyway, I had a waitress. I had to work in a box office. And now I just have to wake up and draw. And I don't know if there is a God, but I sit down and the first thing I say is, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's my heaven on earth.
No, it's beautiful. And I'm completely, and this is why I love you and why we're friends, because I'm obsessed with the way, like, if somebody heard you talking that way about the art you make, but didn't know what it looked like yet, they would not guess that it looks like this. That's why I'm so obsessed with the way that you speak about it, right? They would assume that you were like ready to fly off into a murderous rage at any second based on the subject matter that you choose to highlight. And yet being with you is hilarious and gentle.
It was interesting as well because when my parents thought I was a genius, because Jewish, middle class, very underrating their children all the time. So they always showed my artwork to all the relatives or anyone who came to the house. And a lot of my stuff was really violent, vile. As I said, I had knives in my poor mother's head. I had things going on like you shouldn't know from. And my mother would go, look what Laurie did. And, people, my cousins would back away from me. And, but I was encouraged to just be myself, whatever that was.
Well, and here we are. Thanks, Mom.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
No kidding.
And I mean, speaking of which, I kind of just want to ask you the same question because as unlikely as, this incredible work being made with tiny pencils, it's equally unlikely that somebody would alight on a process like that. I mean, we all know assemblage artists, but this is something completely different. Yes, you have to collect a literal to the gills, floor to ceiling, airplane hanger size warehouse full of boxes of tiny what's-its. The point is, I think you have a really expansive and conceptual and narrative relationship to the way that you practice assemblage. It's also not the only thing you do. You're a painter and you draw as well. And so not only do I want to hear, and we all do more about specifically my own city, but in that same way, and I think that this goes to there's almost like a performative aspect to both of your work, but it happens in my head because I see the work and you cannot help but imagine what you doing it looks like. Right. And I don't think that's true of every artist. You're not like, oh, I wonder what the dark room's like. In other words, I look at this and in my mind, I'm seeing what that is. And I look at this and I'm like, I want to live inside your head where I'm like, the coffee shop. Okay, I've got a vintage Bustelo can in here somewhere, but also the idea behind my own city and it being, something that came from you. It was really about the community, like all of that. So for you as an artist, what was your path that ended up with this insanity on the other side of the wall?
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Hi, I'm Susan Feldman, and I did MOC, which stands for My Own City. And what it is basically is a city of 50 buildings that I would want in my city if I was designing my own city. I have been known for building a lot of structures out of found wood for many years, but I consider myself a mixed media artist. And as Shana mentioned, I can draw, I can paint, I've done every kind of medium that there is. And usually it's whatever I want to express, that's how I go about choosing the medium. And I had this crazy addiction for found wood for many years that would literally make me pull over in my car if I saw them tearing down an old building, and I'd get my kids involved and their friends, and
I've talked to your husband and children about this.
Yeah.
They're like, oh no, she will pull over on the way to dinner.
Exactly.
And put stuff in the car.
Yeah. And one time I had one of my son's friends find me looking through a trash bin on the street in Santa Monica one day. So I had this huge thing with, I'm over it. I'm sober from the found wood. Just want to clarify that. So I had been building a lot of large structures. And one day I came into the studio and I found a lot of little scraps of things I had painted on pieces of wood. And I just started working. Now, unlike Laurie, I don't want control at all. I kind of relish the happenstance. And one of the things that I loved about working with found wood is that it has its own life. And often what gives me ideas is just by looking at the wood and just by holding it or smelling it. And so I like starting from that place, and that determines what I'm going to make often. And so when I made the first little house that I played around with in my studio, I just had a fun time, and it's called the Hill House. It's the first piece I made in MOC, and I had so much fun making it. And that's something that's very, very important to me in my work. There's got to be fun because I'm here and I want to have a good time. And so I even joke to myself when I'm having a hard time with a piece, I think to myself, wait a minute, who gave me the assignment? Just stop, change it. You know, it doesn't have to be, I don't have to turn it in by Friday. So that's kind of how I approach my work. And in general, all of it, it's like, if I'm into that, I'm doing it. And just like with mock, I had a fun time making that one house. So I thought, let me make another. I made another house. And that again was, I called it the fun house because it looked like fun. And then I realized, you know, I'm having fun. I want to make more. So
Okay, we'll have to unpack the psychology of the order that you came up with them in. Like,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
there's a house, there's another house. At this point, we
Where do we-
definitely need a
yeah.
coffee place,
Yes.
a dispensary, because
Right,
what
'cause
else,
we ha-
what are we doing
Right,
here?
exactly.
You know, like,
Yeah.
like, but I would just, it's not the most important part, but it's,
Right,
it's
yeah.
funny to me, like how you,
The
like,
order.
well, now what are we
Yeah.
doing? And at no point do you need either police or a bank.
Well, that's right. That's right. And don't forget, this was, so just to go back a little bit, after I made the two houses, I was like, okay, I want to make more, but I don't just want to make houses. You know what? I'm going to make my own goddamn city. And I started this in 2019. I was like 61 or something. And I thought, I'm 61 years old and I'm a strong woman and I'm going to fucking make a city. And I did. Just what I wanted to address too is that, like, the only plan that I had for the city is that I would think of these buildings I wanted in my city and I would just write them down. Like, the ideas would come to me. I'd be in the car and oh God, we got to have there's got to be a book haven. There's got to be somewhere we can go read books, and there's got to be a campsite, and then we need a hot springs. So, and so I would make these lists and I would hang them up in the studio. And I would come into the studio every morning and look at the list and just go, I think I'm going to make the breakfast joint. And that's how it started. And believe it or not, Laurie and I were talking about this just on the way here about how we have actor friends. If you ask your actor friends, they always are being asked, how do you memorize your lines? How do you, do that? And for us as artists, often it's, how long does it take you? But one of the things that I realized is that I kind of have this mental inventory in my head of the wood I have, of the little tchotchkes I have, of the things that just something, I'm walking along the street, walking my dog. I see something that interests me. I pick it up and I put it in the studio because I just figure it's going to turn into something. It's definitely a hoarder aspect.
It's working.
Yes. Well, ask any artist here, what's in their closets or whatever,
But then when it's like a masterpiece like this gets built, and then you get to be like, see,
that's right.
I told you I was going to need that someday.
That's what I tell my husband. Yeah.
I love that. Another thing, just as like an aside, is that this is now the third place that it's been shown, and it's reconfigurable, which is the other thing. And so it also has this like ever evolving sort of site responsive quality to it as well, which I find really interesting because it comes apart and it gets rebuilt a little differently.
Right. And that's something that also I'm just crazy about. I love, because it's not the same thing. I have no plan what it's going to look like each time. This is the third iteration, and the buildings are all the same buildings, but depending on the size of the space or, what I'm feeling that day, I might put the old guy's house next to the school because the ball goes over the fence all the time and it bothers the old guy. But I make sure that by the art studio, we have the dispensary and the cafe.
Yeah. Right, that the coffee place and the dispensary, the bookstore are all
they're all there.
With walking distance, quality of life issues.
Exactly.
I mean, I think that's interesting. And actually, that reminds me that it's been a couple years, which is horrifying, but the last time I was at your studio, you were working on, there was the smog piece that we had, the electric factory piece. But you were in the stages of working on the altarpiece that was going to be installed. And so you, at that point, also had to deal with architecture and the history of the place. And you figured that out as well. Like what you do, plus it was going in like some crazy art historical gem, right? The altarpiece that opened up, and it was
My favorite painting of all time is Jan van Eyck's Lamb of God, which is in Ghent, and it has doors that open, and I always wanted to do an egg tempera painting of that. But so gave myself a gift, made enough money during COVID to take a year off and make a 20-foot drawing. And
in her living room.
My living room is exactly 20 feet long. And It's a drawing with doors that open, and it's about climate change. And as Susan was saying, I started making these plastic bags, drawing them. I was drawing them, and I was doing 100 million plastic bags. And I was thinking, I can't, what am I, why? And I was thinking, what's going on? What am I? And I was just like, Laurie, you're doing this to yourself. You don't have to do this.
Right.
But I also allow the drawings to take over as well. I mean, it is controlled technique, but a lot of times, like in this drawing over here, I take a wet sponge and dip it in charcoal powder and just go on the paper like that and draw into it and see what happens. So I didn't know that was going to happen, but it did.
Mhm.
And in the architecture thing in the corner in the back there called Happy, with all the skeletons holding phones, I went to one of the best art schools in the USA, Carnegie Mellon University. They did not teach me perspective. They said, look, you take the brush, you go art. So I would cut classes and try to teach myself how to draw and make, bodies and things. And so that thing in the corner is not right. I still don't know how to do perspective. I just make it up as I'm going along. I use a mirror to look at my work so it's back to front. So, because I can't see it after a while. And then I look in the mirror and I go, oh, that's off. And I correct it. I don't know how to do perspective in a normal way. I am totally, even though I have a BFA, big fucking artist, I am self-taught. Isn't that bizarre?
Bizarre is one word for
Yeah.
it. I mean, it's like, it's unbelievable. But I think what's so interesting though, is that, so many of the artists that you were naturally drawn to, your Durers, your Flemish Renaissance, whatever, that's who, if you had gone to art school in a different era, that was the canon of Western European art history that would have been taught to you. And so I find it really fascinating that you gravitated towards them on your own. It's like such a woman out of time almost, but it's the opposite of what you think of as rebellion. It's like, give me the 14th century, like, right? And I love that for you, because I think that there's something about, like, people look at these and they can't explain why they're thinking about Dürer because it's so unambiguously contemporary, right? But and they feel like they want to describe the work as realistic, but it's quite mannerist. And if you're going in here, I think about all the creepy people in Bruegel paintings and all of that, and like you kind of like feel almost like you shouldn't look at them too much because it's right, that energy, like that's what's in these, but the subject is like us, right? And I feel like that's a dynamic that it's not like entirely unfamiliar, but I do think that the way you do it remains unique. You know what I mean? Like I think about like, I don't know, Owen Smith, who made like, Vermeer style paintings of skinheads chopping wood or whatever. Like this kind of like slamming those idioms together is not completely new. But what's interesting is that it has a way of being something that the kind of outsider or like allegedly lowbrow artists kind of take up, right? Like that's not an inner academic sanctum stance at all. And so it's really interesting to me that it's so kind of counterculture, but it's so canonical, right? And that I studied art history, so that's why I nerd out on that part of you. But I think it's really important because I think one thing is the willingness to learn, to teach yourself, but also like the willingness to work this hard to make something good is kind of not always prioritized in the fads of today's contemporary art world. I don't want to get hate mail, but let's be honest. We don't start with skill, right? We don't always say like, they're so good at the thing. We kind of go like, this means that, or it reminds me of that, or it makes me feel this way, or what they have to say about it and we believe it or whatever. But like, this is so technique. It's such a technique bomb. And I feel like as somebody who looks at art all day, every day, that I wish there was more people like you
It's
hanging stuff on
interesting.
walls.
I mean, kids get in touch with me via social media and they say, what kind of paper do you use? What pencils do you use? And I go, sweetheart, use whatever fucking paper you
Right.
want. Use whatever pencils you want. If you want to draw like me, go into a room, close the door, and draw for 15 hours for 60 years.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
I don't get an answer after that. People seem to think it's magic, that it
Yeah.
just happened
Yeah.
to me. And it's interesting. I have a brother who's totally not into art whatsoever. And I used to say to him, Roger, if you drew as much as me, you would be as good as me. And he said, no, no. And it's true. I had the desire. I had the obsession. I had the willpower, you're going into and you're picking up pieces of wood. I want it more than my whole life is built around drawing. There is nothing not drawing in my life. And if there is, it gets ejected. So if there's any friends who I haven't seen for a while,
Because then at the level of content, right? You could be this good at, I mean, I love William Kentridge's work. It's not like it looks like this, but my favorite works are like 15-foot tall drawings of coffee pots. And I'm like, that's freaking amazing. And I'm obsessed. And I will sell everything I currently own and just have that one drawing and I'll be happy. It's a coffee pot. And yeah, it's a metaphor. And yeah, he's a genius. It's right. But your subject matter is time and time again the most fraught, difficult, politically charged bullshit calling that one little nice Jewish girl could do on the world that we live in. And so social media is killing you. You think you're happy, you're a skeleton in, a flat and perspectival space. That man who shall not be named, I can't believe that's not an image of the past. I know that, there are times you shouldn't be drawing, people who don't know you're drawing them. And it's not because you see it and you love it so much you want to draw it. It's something else, right? And so you do your art from love, but your subject matter, even like the cutesy ones, women with, riding giant poodles and whatnot.
Yeah.
That's probably not an actual one, but you know what I mean? Is like the woman, with the many faces. Like even those, there's social critique, there's feminist critique. Like it was never like I'm celebrating the beauty of the world with my insane galactic skill. And I find that interesting, right?
my grandma used to say to me, Laurie, why can't you make something I can hang over the sofa?
Right. And you're like, I drew this baby.
Yeah.
No.
My mom said, Mom, that's not what she does. I lucked out.
Mom.
I lucked out, man. I lucked out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because not to put a too fine a point on it, but you could not readily assume that every parent would be down.
But it's interesting. I studied and studied and studied
saw how
and
hard you worked.
studied to find my own voice. And it's a lot of artists are derivative and they don't find their own voice. They stop at a certain point. And I don't know what drove, I was very lucky. I was allowed to look, to study, to be. And I always tried to be a good little girl. And I always tried to be a good little student. And I looked like a good little girl. I had Mary Jane's with the white socks and all. I tried to, I said thank you and please. But my drawings, man, oh man. And I was allowed to do that. I looked very, very sweet and lovely. Somebody came up to me at one of my openings and showed me these tattoos that he'd made of his famous art, his most favorite artist. It looked like he had Donny Osmond. And I said, why do you have Donny Osmond as one of your favorite artists? And he said, no, that's you.
How do you come back from something like that? Next, you need to do a portrait of Donny Osmond just to excise that demon out of your head. but okay. So on the point of social engagement, it's almost, I love the two of you together because you're so similar, but then every ping pong is like almost flip the telescope back around because you're somebody who's out there like in low key hippie mode, right? Everything is like peace and love. And I have all the snacks in my purse for, but then, the work is a little bit like that, but the work is also like addressing. I mean, the reason that this work is utopian is as a massive form of resistance against the reality of where we are and where we're heading. And this was started in 2019.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine how, I don't have to imagine, I know how you feel, but like, you are just as mad as she is. Okay. And yet, but the work is like this utopian carefree zone. And I just wonder if you want to unpack that a little bit, because I know that you are a politically active, engaged citizen. And I know it's not escapism. So like, what is it for you when you're working on these things?
It started as escapism because I share a similar thing with Laurie, but my parents were not her parents. And my drawing table sat in my bedroom from the time I was, I don't know, I think when I was 12 or something. They got me a drawing table, which was, amazing. And actually my mother, one of the things that she did do when I was 8, she took me for oil painting classes. So that's what I thanked her for when she passed. So my sister has memories of me just being in my room with the door closed, and I would be drawing all the time. And, so I don't know, started as escapism, but I think I'm self-taught. So I didn't go to school. I went for a minute to Cal State Northridge and then just stopped because I wanted to just do what I knew I wanted to do. And I always had jobs that were creative type jobs. I worked in the music industry. I was a graphic designer. I was an art director. So I never had to dress up when I went to work. I prided myself on that, like never had to wear heels or anything. But so I think I was born with that sort of mentality of just like more light, let's say, if you want to use the, title of the, yeah. And I will say, I do have 2 grown kids, and I will say that through them also, I was able to continue in that zone. I feel like I didn't grow up in a lot of ways. That just really, it's true. I mean, I'm goofy and silly and weird and funny. And when my kids were young, that was great. Now they're older and I'm still that way and can't help it, And so things that matter to me, like you're saying, there's a seriousness to, I want a utopian city. I want to make a city that just has the things I want in my city. We don't need police because we all get along. We don't need money. We don't need money. There's no banks. We don't have hospitals because we don't get sick. We stay well. And that's just kind of the way that I think. And I'm I have a spiritual background in that way. And so I really and truly have been through a lot within myself spiritually that allows me to look at things in certain ways. And sometimes I do kind of take a step back and go, what is this grown woman laying on the floor playing with a 2-year-old kid rolling around? And it's me. And it's like, but yeah, I can. I just feel the freedom to be who I am and to look at things the way that I do. And so the power that came with me allowing myself to build my own city was such an obsession. And again, it's that word, obsession. When my kids were young, people would say, well, how do you do? You've got 2 small kids. How do you, I have to. I was drawing and making art before I had kids, and it's another child of mine. So I eat, I breathe, I make stuff. And my kids know that. Like they grew up running around my studio and going to art shows and museums because it's who I am. So yeah, but there's the obsession factor. Do I think, if someone told me, because I don't think I'm a patient person. And when I do my drawings or when I'm doing this stuff too, I will sit forever and make a little thing and the restaurant needs some tables with little flowers on each thing. Okay, it has to be That's the way it needs to be. But patience, my ass, I'm not going to. I remember my dad had a sign in his office. It was a picture of two vultures and it said, patience, my ass. I'm going to kill something. Get it?
Yes, because normally vultures wait for something to die because they're carrion.
Yeah, I'm going to do it.
I'm gonna kill
And
I'm
the- and-
hungry. I'm just gonna.
Yeah, building this city, I started it in my studio. My studio is obviously not this big. And I did another project years ago where I built a person's house in my city, also Virginia's house. But I didn't stop to think about, how's it going to fit in here? How am I going to get it out? Where am I going to show it? I just built it and figured that part out later. And that's what I did with mock too, is it's just like, you got to do what you got to do.
I love that so much. But I also just want to say, like, I feel like I know a guy who is like an adventurous, like architecture type guy, Tom, because I need this to become something I can walk into. I think we all need that,
That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a forever home for mock.
but like at scale.
Oh, at scale. Oh, yeah.
I
yeah,
need
yeah.
someone to build it,
Sure.
like a place I can go to the city. I need like a city planning utopian experiment, as there is a rich history of in architecture history and social history, but of that made entirely out of salvaged materials for sustainability reasons.
Absolutely.
And with all the same spiritual and civic precepts that go into my own city. So that, I think we all want that. And I think that, there's another thing about all of the 4 artists in here have their own special relationships to architecture, which again, I just like nerd out on how happy that makes me, because of like I said in the very beginning, there is something about living in this neighborhood that gives you an architectural consciousness that even if you didn't come here with it, you can't live here and not develop it. And so I just personally love that that's kind of folded in also to like what goes on here, or at least what has gone on here.
Wow. Thank you all for coming. What extraordinary artists tonight. What extraordinary human beings. I'm meeting them, working with them, and then having the astounding coincidence of having Shana as a common friend made this an incredible, incredible process and a beautiful show. Thank you all so much for coming. Enjoy yourself, relax, look at the art. Thank you all.